Welcome to the True North Fantasy Football Podcast.
What is up, fantasy people? Welcome back to the True North Fantasy Pod. I am Trav, chilling in Dirty Laundry Studios as always. With me, I've got Tyrell McLaughlin. Ty, what's going on, dude?
Same old, same old. Actually, I'm pretty tired. I was up all night last night digging through a specific database. But yeah.
Yes. I am very excited to talk a little bit more about that. You can find me at TCL14 on Twitter. Find Ty at TNFF Tyrell. We are, of course, brought to you by Monkey Knife Fight, the fastest growing DFS platform on the planet. Get in there, throw down on some player prop games. I know the football season is over, but they can't stop, won't stop over at Monkey Knife Fight. They've got NBA, college basketball, golf, NASCAR, UFC, and of course, near and dear to us northern folk, they've got some hockey props as well. Use the promo code TNFF at your first deposit, and you will get an instant match of up to $50. That promo code again, TNFF. You turn your $50 deposit into 100 bones. So big thanks to everyone who's already signed up there, and thanks to our buddy Nick and the crew over at Monkey Knife Fight. Really loving the partnership with them, and lots of good stuff coming for Monkey Knife Fight. But now, Ty, that the bills are paid, we are fired up for tonight's guest. You had a little teaser there talking about those databases, and tonight we've got Dave Wright joining us. You can find him on Twitter at FF_Spaceman. You can also find him on A Tale of Two Rivals, which is a Killer Dynasty podcast, and of course with the draft on its way, find him on the Rookie Fever podcast as well. That should be a staple in the old rotation. So those can all be found on your favorite podcast platforms. And Dave, we appreciate you coming on tonight, my friend.
What an introduction. You got the pro treatment. The red carpet is rolled out. I am ready to go. So this is exciting. I'm really excited you guys had me on here talking rookies, the best part of dynasty season right now. This is awesome.
Well, I think, we'll get into it, but the spreadsheet's kind of an invaluable resource this time of the year. And that's why I'm kind of a fanboy. So I was just so happy to have you on. And, on the most recent episode, I really think the Rookie Fever is a must leading up right around this time of the year. And I love that you said caramel properly on the most recent episode. I noticed one of your co-hosts was saying it like Shaq. He was saying caramel.
Well, I'm from Maine, so me pronouncing anything right, that's something special. So, I mean, gosh, I can't believe it. I'm repping the home state. I guess we're not just in the backwoods, so I'll take it.
We're no strangers up here to pronunciation questions. We get that a lot being from Canada. Apparently, you Southerners really like our accent for some reason, but I always say to that, what accent? I don't even have one.
What's with that, eh?
Yeah, what's that all about? So, Dave, I know I can speak for Ty as well when I say that your database work is some of the best that we have ever used as a data resource. I know you offer some really good stuff for free, but I really want you to talk about your Patreon because you've got a lot of really good stuff on there. More than just spreadsheets as well. You've got your rankings, you've got some video content. Why don't you talk a little bit about what's on the Patreon and where the people can find it?
So most of the Patreon is free. So it's a place for me to put all of the spreadsheets because it gets having various links on Twitter. It's kind of difficult for people to find it. So the idea was people were asking me to create a Patreon. So I did, but it's got every database on there. It's got the the big rookie database with over 2,000 players. It's got the NFL database, which is for the Patreon, goes all the way back to 2009 from 2009 to 2020. And it has every stat you could possibly think of, at air yards, target share, Whopper. That I get excited to talk about Whopper. Yeah, that's in there. Every player who scored a point in a season is in that database. So I really, that's my go-to. That's my biggest resource that I use a lot. And then also I use my weekly database in season that I also use a lot. That's there. But then there's all kinds of other stuff that gets kind of boring. I don't want to, it's a problem when you talk spreadsheets too much to stop like an episode or a first date. It gets a little boring. So I don't want to get too talking too much about spreadsheets, but then I also do some videos where usually it's about whatever I'm preparing for the week for a podcast or an article. But the last couple of weeks, it's just been about process. So I'm really been thinking about I like to put out a lot of free data because I want people to be able to do this stuff for themselves, have all the materials that they want in all one place. But I'm an amateur. I'm not like some statistician. I didn't go to school to be a stats guy. So I'm just trying to learn like everyone else, but I want everyone to have the same tools I do. So that's kind of what goes on over at the Patreon.
Yeah. Teach a man to fish. I honestly, I think you couldn't do a better job at doing a lot of that. Really, the Patreon, some of those videos, even talking through some of the stat stuff, I take away something that I didn't know before every time. And what I did, just a personal recommendation for listeners out there is you can always condense people's spreadsheets. So somebody like Dave Wright's, like his is so awesome, but it is pretty intimidating, to be honest. So what you can do is just strip it down and take what you want out of it when you make a copy or whatever. It's a good little tip for people to get more comfortable just kind of navigating and filtering through spreadsheets. But the prospect one is kind of, I love that you're kind of in process mode. That's where we all are at this point of the offseason. That's why we all love it. And I think the prospect database is just, like I said, an invaluable resource for process. And, the NFL one is great, but we are on the topic of rookies tonight. And yeah, I mean, for our listeners, this spreadsheet, it allows you to filter for so much. It is unbelievably customizable. It's also like an outlier finder. My favorite part is that you actually track fantasy finishes once prospects enter the NFL, which makes it kind of a hit rates machine. Like some of the things you can do just for our listeners, for example, I use it to see draft capital versus fantasy finishes in the past. I look at it for, obviously production profiles, historical data, player comp, stuff like that. But I love that you have stuff like conferences in there, Dave, so you can see the relationship strength the schedule has with fantasy football finishes and stuff, and how it all differs kind of by position. So I just love it. It's why it's such a treat to have you on right at this time of the year. And I think you're a perfect person to kind of ask these tougher questions. So as we all kind of just wade into the rookies here, what are a few stats or metrics that are some of your biggest boxes to check for prospects? Maybe for wide receivers and running backs, maybe. So
first off, I said, early on, I said that, spreadsheet talk isn't that exciting, but I'm a little flush here and you talk about all the different things you can do with a database. I mean, oh goodness, I'm out of breath here. Let me catch it. So
meow.
It really is. It really will. It's a time sucker, but it's so much fun if you like that nerdy stuff. And then you can find, you just end up with a better take on someone like Anthony McFarland last year than other people have.
The idea is, hey, you want to see if something matters, it's in there. If you want to know what like, do returns matter? Like, do kick returns, punt returns, do they matter? Do scrimmage yards matter? Does draft capital, does age, how many years you're in school? Does BMI matter? Does 40 time matter? Speed score? Everything that you could think of, you can test it in there. It's a raw database. I'm not saying that this stat matters, this one doesn't matter, but it's got everything in there. So that's what I find exciting about it. But so if I was to boil it down to myself, what do I like to use, especially for running backs and wide receivers? I would probably say that I care most about, so a lot of stat nerds, they like to take all these different stats that they find valuable in their models or whatever, and boil it down to a single metric and they have like a pre-draft score and they can rank it. And then that's their prospects. I'm still an amateur. And the way I go about prospecting is I want to see the different ways players do things. Did they do it at a young age? Did they do it when they were older? Were they consistent? When did they break out? Were they high volume producer? Were they only a single year producer? Did they start off strong and fade? So I kind of like to paint a picture of what it is. And how I do that is usually with team stats, like market share type stats, like the percentage of their college offense or how many scrimmage yards they had per attempt on offense. Those are my go-tos that I really care about. And then what I do is I look at that, like I said, like when did they do it? At what age? Did they progress? And then I look at how does that stack up against successful NFL wide receivers? How does that stack up with other college prospects on their teams, like in college? And then how does that compare to their college conference? Like some conferences are more offensive minded, some are defensive minded. So how does that stack up against, so I can adjust? Because the problem that I think a lot of people, when they first start looking at prospects, they're like, oh, they had 1,000-yard season, they had 20 touchdowns. Well, if you did that on the best offense in college, that or in the whole NCAA, you got to weight that. And so That's what I like about percentage stats of your offense or market share stats, because you can then compare them to other prospects and prospects from previous seasons in college. And that's kind of how I do it. So that's basically the two main stats I do. And then for running backs, I really care about attempts per game, how many receptions they had, so I can try to see if they're a 3-down back or not. And then I think that kind of covers most of it for running backs and wide receivers. So a lot there. I hope that was pretty clear for you guys. I don't know.
No, it really was. And, we'll get into some of that when we're talking some of these prospects later. But I loved what you said about, you're kind of relying on what these college teams showed us. And that's, how much faith they have in certain players in certain situations. And I like how you talk about, a lot of people do these algorithms and everything. And it's always pretty similar. It's a box checking exercise that you weigh different things differently for different positions and different player types and skill sets. So I love what you said there. And, this running back class that we're going to hit shortly sort of highlights that. Like, we have a smaller group of guys as a whole, I think. And so I care more about efficiency metrics like yards per touch and explosive play metrics, their pass catching chops. Dave, do you think there's any stats that stand out to you that get overused or used improperly, or even just a metric you like less than others?
Yeah. So essentially raw stats are pretty, if they had sometimes like, oh, look how many 1,000-yard seasons they had in college or how many touchdowns they had. Touchdowns are pretty variable. Just like when we talk about in fantasy in the NFL, in college, it's also variable. Now, touchdowns do matter and they do have sub-signal, but the problem is they are pretty variable, or are volatile, I should say. So it's tough to rely on them too much. So I like to look at touchdowns because I think when you're getting touchdowns, it does indicate, points matter in football games, and how your offense is, how they're allocating, who's scoring matters. So I care. I just don't care as much as others because there's other stats that are more predictive, like market share, like yards per attempt. And then so I despise yards per carry because it doesn't really tell you what you think it does. Now, a good way to look at yards per carry is what I have a stat in the database that is yards per carry compared to the team average. So if one back has actually a high amount, like 1.8 yards per carry over the team average, then I'm like, okay, that means they are more efficient, their team. So it is a skill that I care about. But those are kind of beside that and the raw stats, like just yardage. But a good way to really quickly fix raw stats is just divide by how many games they played. Receptions per game
especially
played. Especially in college, is so easy. Now, I wish I had targets. Now, Player Profiler has targets. I'm not 100% sure how they find their target share stuff, but I can't get reliable targets data going back to 2000, 2003. Even for like small schools, I want to try to have a level playing field how I measure these players to past players. So I don't use target share. So receiving yards or receptions per game played is just a quick way to adjust any counting stat. If you just put a per game played after it, it's just an easy fix.
Totally. Yeah. And again, that's awesome. That's kind of the beauty.
Go ahead,
for it, Chuck.
No, it's all good.
I was just going to say, it's kind of the beauty. Yeah, like it really is the beauty of the spreadsheet, right? Like the historical data, being able to compare it all and see how successful some similar players in the past have been at the NFL level for fantasy owners. But yeah, that is getting ahead of ourselves kind of, Trav. That's why, we are going to talk some process-based stuff. I mean, we talked earlier, Trav, about taking sort of a granular approach, making sure we get some good to know info out there. Going into any NFL draft, I think it's just important. So yeah, I know you have a good question or two, so take her away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was all really good. And especially like for myself, Dave, who I'm a few years into deep analysis. So I'm just starting to like hit my prime for like soaking all this stuff up. And that's part of why I appreciate you coming on, and I appreciate you putting out the content that you put on. One thing I'm curious about though is pre-draft, when you're looking at these guys, you set your first set of rankings for these players. Leading up to the draft, there's news, there's pro days. I'm curious as to pre-draft how much you usually change your rankings after you've got your first set. Like in a normal year, we would have a combine, which could be an influencer. Does that stuff affect your ranks pre-draft very much?
So the combine is significant for a couple of different ways. For running backs, I do care about 40 times. I care about, you can't really find a lot. So if we were to decide what is predictive of NFL success for running backs and wide receivers, and specifically wide receivers, actually, I'll just focus on wide receivers for a second. If Harvard's analytics did a study, countless people have done studies, wide receiver athletic measurables do not matter. It's terrible. So it's better to just look at the production because you're getting and when I say it does not matter, I think it matters to an extent, but we don't have a way to measure it to make it matter, because I think if we were to break it up to slot receivers, to big play receivers, to field stretchers, to close to line of scrimmage receivers, and then compared their athletic measurables, we could find that it matters. But the way that we have it set up right now, it's really difficult to say that it matters, except for one stat, height adjusted speed score, which just takes the player's height. I forget the exact calculation, but it's like I'm not even gonna get into it, but it is height divided by 40 times, essentially, with some kind of weighted inches, like some kind of weight to it. And height adjusted speed score does matter for wide receivers. So I do care about their 40 time for adjusted for height, but the combine, I do care about their measurements. I don't care much about BMI for anything. BMI is overrated. If you look at BMI, it actually mirrors the player sample. So there's not a lot of running backs that enter the NFL with a BMI under 27. Well, there's not a lot of running backs in the NFL who were successful with a BMI under 27. It doesn't stand out. So it matches the sample. So that indicates that it's actually not really doing anything. Yeah, there's not a lot of guys who are successful under 27, but it's a sample size issue, not a does the stat matter issue. I'm getting a little all over the place here, but combine, I care about the size because if a running back's 220 pounds, that does tell me that they are more likely to have a 3-down workload, but it doesn't tell me that how good they're going to be. It just kind of profiles how they're going to play in the NFL more likely than how successful. So it paints that how they play type thing. And just like for height for receivers, and that it kind of tells me that. It doesn't tell me how good they're going to be. So I care about that. But besides that, I think probably one of the biggest harms for people's prospect, their process is weighting combine too much, but it is important. Just it's overweighted in my opinion, and a lot of people I think agree as well. In the who are more number inclined than I am. So that's kind of the big thing, and that's kind of I think that's about it for pre-draft process.
Yeah, no, I like that. And you don't have to worry about going off in these directions. It's like listening to poetry here, man. I appreciate that. That's good. No, it's sweet to hear how your process goes because, we respect what you're doing out there. And, I kind of think it bears out in the work there. Now we're looking at post-draft, though. Spaceman. I always I know your name's Dave, but I always just want to call you Spaceman because I think that's a badass nickname. So if I call you Spaceman, then that's just I'm a nickname guy. So looking after the draft, and obviously draft capital is a big piece, and landing spot is a big piece. So can you tell us how you use those to adjust values in players after, and if there's things that you're looking for in maybe a landing spot or some draft capital for wide receivers and running backs?
So draft capital is the most predictive thing that we have for running backs and wide receivers that I have in the database. It's the goal for my pre-draft process is to beat draft capital. That's kind of like the standard for any process, is try to get better than the NFL does. That's kind of what you're trying to do. So that just shows you how important draft capital matters. The way I kind of look at it is I break it down to rounds 1 through 3. If you get rounds 1 through 3 capital, then that checks a box for me. Now, first round draft capital matters more, but I'm not going to write a player off because they have third round draft capital. I'm going to write if they're someone that I was high on and they get 6th round draft capital, I'm going to lower them down my rankings. I'm still going to like them, but I'm not going to have them in my top 5 wide receivers, for example. So draft capital really matters. And the goal is, once you have that draft capital, is to try to figure out a process where you can combine different metrics together and improve on draft capital once you get that. So that's kind of how that process works.
Yeah, I like that. Go ahead, Ty.
I was just going to say, like, we have to accept teams' evaluations too, like, even after, like, whether we agree with it or not, I think it can be an important. Also, I've thought about this a lot this offseason. Like, these NFL teams get to work these players out. They get inside scoops from coaches and teammates. So just because we haven't seen them do something on tape, on the stat sheet, doesn't mean they can't. Or if we have an open-ended question about a player, right? Thinking like Justin Jefferson last year, Trav. What I'm saying is draft capital, the way an NFL team evaluates or invests in a player, it can definitely change my mind. And we all know how important it is to shift gears quickly in fantasy in lots of different ways. And prospect evaluation is definitely one of those ways.
The thing about the NFL is when I'm this weird fantasy football nerd who's in my basement playing with spreadsheets, I'm playing checkers. These NFL teams have the real information. They've got the things, what they have to work with for numbers and for insider information and for scouting information is just blows whatever we can have out of the water. So that just shows you when you can use draft capital to kind of, it's an aggregate, or it kind of, it's a stand-in for that. Draft capital is a stand-in for the information that they have. Now, do NFL teams get it wrong? Yeah, they do. And so the idea is I take their input and then mix it together and try to beat it. And one thing I did not answer in your question is landing spot. I think landing spot is tricky because last offseason, everyone was talking about how important landing spot was. If I'm sure you guys remember the conversation, landing spot. Look,
Clyde and JT, right, Ty?
Mm-hmm. Clyde really hammered that one home. Yeah.
But then you say this offseason, everyone's saying, well, I learned last season that landing spot doesn't matter. I just think you have to gauge it appropriately. And it's tough to do it because it changes so rapidly. But I'm going to, in my process, I care more about the production profile than landing spot. That's how I landed on AJ Brown. That's how I care more about the skills than I do. I care more about the profile than I do landing spot because what we think we know about landing spots changes rapidly. Mm-hmm. What could happen in 2 years? Yeah. The pandemic is a very bad example of we couldn't predict the pandemic. Okay, or pandemic, of course we couldn't. But could we predict that Tom Brady was going to be on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in last season before that all went down? Nobody predicted that for Tampa Bay, for Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So it just shows you how rapidly it can change. So when I'm trying to predict a prospect 3 years down the road when they're hitting their prime, I care more about the talent than I do what's going on the NFL team.
Yeah, awesome,
totally. So no, go for it, Trev.
Oh, I was just going to say, Ty, why don't you kick us into some of these players? Because I'm stoked to start talking about them.
Okay. Yeah, really quick. One of the basic questions I did want to make sure we're asking, like important prefaces for every upcoming draft, is knowing how strong the class is at each position, right? Like just like an NFL team, we want to know how we're going to have to address our team needs for our fantasy team. Is it going to be the rookie draft, be a trade? And we know rookie pick value can roller coaster. Like picks are far more valuable in this mystery box form that we're in right now. So knowing the class as a whole can help you decide what your plan is going to be with those rookie picks. And, I just think it has to factor into your offseason template, no matter what that template looks like. And I don't mean just, you might be more or less likely to trade your first round pick, for instance, but you can make sharp moves like trading out for multiple seconds or something because we've started to identify those tiers. And you can think back to what Dave was mentioning when guys like AJ Brown and Nick Chubb were dropping to second rounds of rookie drafts. So getting to these running backs, lots of people seem pretty down on this running back class. So Dave, what do you think? What are your thoughts on this 2021 running back class as a whole?
Wait, there are running backs in this class? I didn't know that.
Yeah, apparently.
So I kind of my dynasty strategy mirrors, how I view my overall dynasty strategy mirrors how I approach rookie drafts and how I do my prospecting. I really value years 1 through 3 of my running back production. There's been studies, and I'm actually doing one. I'm doing a little writing up something right now about how running back scoring is early on compared to later on in their career, especially for the top 12 running backs. I want to hit that high where they're scoring the most fantasy points, where that value doesn't mix up. Because once that value hits what they're actually producing, I'm not getting the same ROI per se, or I'm not maximizing value. So then I sell it once the production matches the value, and I move on. I start my process all over again. That was a really quick version of that. But the idea is that why I mentioned it is because I really value running backs in rookie drafts, because a rookie pick 103, 104 is less valuable than a Dalvin Cook or an Alvin Kamara once they're in their prime, becoming far and away the RB1 or RB2 in a season. So I want to try to hit them early. But this is the first year where I've come across, and I'm not in love with the running backs. Now there's some decent picks, but and I'm not saying that they can't be good, but they're just, the overall profile of this bunch is not as exciting as it was last year. Last year, I could say with definite, there were 4 running backs in last year's class that I would take before any of these running backs. As just from a profile production, not even thinking about what they did in the NFL last year. So that just gives you kind of an idea of where this running back class stacks up.
Yeah, and you start to think that there's probably not going to be a ton going in those top 3 rounds. And we mentioned how important that is. And I have the numbers here. Like, if you look at all 120 running backs, top 12 in the last 10 years in PPR scoring, 35% of them were drafted in the first round. Almost 25% of those seasons were running backs drafted in the second round. 17.5% went in round 3, meaning over 3/4 of all top 12 running backs in the past 10 years were drafted in the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft. So it definitely is important, and it's definitely shaking out like a pretty suspect class. But getting into these names, I want to start with the pair of backs who will flirt with maybe first round draft capital. Maybe I'm being a little optimistic there. But Dave, are you team Najee Harris, or are you team Travis Etienne or other?
I'm team, I have not made a decision yet on Najee Harris or Etienne. They are probably my 1 and 2 backs in this class. I might lean Etienne, but then I have some film people telling me Etienne has a couple holes in his game, that just some more question marks than just the date, because there's holes in his data profile or his production profile too. So I'm more inclined to like Etienne, but Harris I go back and I look at Harris too, and I just go back and forth. So that was, you put me on the spot there about who I was going to rank 1 or 2, but they're tied. So that's kind of a cop out for me right now.
No, and I'm with you. I see both arguments for sure.
And do you want to guys, we'll just dive right into Harris, or what do we want to do here?
Yeah, go for it. Give me your thoughts on that, Dave.
So he's got the size. That's the first thing. He's got the size to handle a workload in the NFL, a majority workload in the NFL, which is a check mark for me, because that just talks about possible ceiling. And he also has a season where he caught 43 passes. I believe last year was the year he caught 43. He had 43 receptions. That also talks about upside, because if you can catch the ball and you can handle a decent workload, that just talks about your ceiling and being a 3-down back. And that is what is attractive about Najee Harris, is that he had almost 19 rushes per game, I think over 19 rushes per game in his senior season, which is bell cow level. That excites me. And he also had 30 TDs. I'm trying to think. Yeah, 30 touchdowns total last season. So he can get it done. The problem with Najee Harris is that he did it in age 22. Why did it take till age 22? Now, I understand that he played at Alabama with Josh Jacobs and Damian Harris, and that they're always getting 4 or 5-star recruits for the running back position. But last season, his junior season, there wasn't much competition. The same competition that was there last season was there this year. And he only had 16 carries per game, didn't have as many receptions, and half as many touchdowns. And ultimately, age doesn't matter as much for running backs as it does for wide receivers. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, if I'm taking a top 5 rookie pick in Superflex on this player, I want to have just a little bit more confidence. Maybe draft capital solves that, and I can just I don't have to like hem and haw over it. If he gets 1 or 2 round draft capital, I'll feel a lot better and say, okay, give me Najee Harris. But that question mark of, at this point in my process, I'm not in love with Harris.
Yeah, totally. I think I like him just because he is elusive. He makes people miss at that size. He's definitely a plus pass catcher. I mean, over 700 yards in the past 2 seasons at Alabama in the receiving game. And another thing you can do with Dave's prospect spreadsheet, guys, is pull up these running backs and you could compare everyone from this class. But you could also look in here, and I'm seeing that Najee Harris's 15 receiving touchdowns in his college football career is tied for the 4th most by any running back prospect since 2003. So I was really impressed that I guess I didn't realize how impressive he was in the passing game. I know some of those touchdowns are pretty hard to rely on when he's playing in a pretty historic offense last season, but just the fact that he was able to do it and that Mac Jones was looking for him when it came in close there. Like if I'm obligated to give my RB1 right now, because like you said, Dave, I'm kind of tied right now, but I think I would be Najee just because I'm more confident at this stage that he's going to get that solid draft capital. I'm less confident in saying that with Travis Etienne. And he, like you were saying, he just stands out as, because I think he is going to be valued as sort of the only guy in this upper tier who has that bell cow size and is also a highly touted prospect as opposed to a Javonte Williams or something. So size, speed, hard to bring down, and the receiving upside for sure. But I still love Etienne too. And I think he's a pretty big target for fantasy owners too.
Cosign.
Yeah, because I just think if you're desperate to find like the Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey, if you're desperate to find that guy, I think everybody's going to point to Etienne, and just because he was so dominant out of the backfield. And I think a lot of these running backs, like I just think we're getting into the systems, schemes, outside run zone schemes that every team seems to be running these days, and I just think he'll fit right into one of those offenses. But I want to get some more of these names in the universe. So first up is Javonte Williams, a big 220-pound back, the Thunder in that Tar Heel backfield. More rushing yards, receiving yards, and touchdowns in 2021 than he had in his previous 2 seasons combined. So, Dave, are you on this train? Because Javonte Williams has really elevated his stock after that big final season.
So, I am in on. He's my running back 3 at this point because he's got now the issue with Javonte Williams or even Michael Carter, who's in the same backfield as Javonte Williams at UNC, is that they shared a backfield together, so they might have capped each other's ceiling. But I'm not going to explain it away here when I just was poo-pooing on Najee Harris. So I think that Michael Carter limited Javonte Williams' ceiling. But the thing is, even with Michael Carter there, he's got the size. I think he might. I don't know. I think what I've read is that he might be 215, 220, probably.
Yeah,
as far as size. And he did it. So first off, and he's only played 3 years. He did it as a true freshman, as a sophomore, and a junior. So he's young. He did it at a young age, which again, doesn't matter as much, but it's still impressive when you're playing as a running back to play against other established older players who have put on the muscle and who have been in the system to do what he's done. But his touch is limited. He only had 14.3 attempts per game in his final season. But the big thing is, and this is Zach Reed's thing, so I really appreciate Zach, what he says. 25 receptions. I think he actually does 20, but for me, 25 receptions is a threshold that really matters. And he hit that with Michael Carter in the backfield. So that just shows me that he's got the size. He was a goal line back, scored 19 touchdowns, like you mentioned. And he has the receiving ability. So he does hit those 3. He can possibly be a 3-down back. Now it's more of a projection because he didn't do it in college, but he has that potential. Whereas the only other player that I could consider at 3 would be Chuba Hubbard or Chuba. I get confused there a little bit how to pronounce it, but
no, I think we're all sorry.
I just wanted to go back to Travis Etienne for a moment because I don't think I gave him enough credit as a home run hitter. He only had 14 attempts, similar to Javonte Williams per game in his high. But Etienne, what happened last year? Do you guys remember the T. Higgins discussion a little bit? How he was kind of discounted when you were comparing him to the other wide receivers in that class?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
A lot of that was because he didn't have the production numbers, because what Clemson was doing is they were blowing teams out of the water, and they were sitting Etienne. They were sitting T. Higgins for large portions of the game. Second half, sometimes I'm not sure if Etienne was getting more than 3 carries in a second half for a lot of games because they were just sitting him. And that is sometimes when I will take that information and manually adjust these things, because he did have 70 career rushing touchdowns. Najee Harris, I think, only had 46 career rushing touchdowns. Etienne had 70, which is that's incredible. He averaged 21 points per game PPR in college, and 37 receptions and 48 receptions his final 2 seasons. He's got that. Now, is he going to be a 3-down back? Possibly not. Probably not. But he definitely has it where he'll be active on 3rd down. He can score touchdowns. He's going to be a weapon, and he can score from anywhere. So that's, I think, the plus side for Etienne that I just wanted to throw in there, because I don't want to make people think that I was hating on him too much.
Totally, yeah. And, we alluded to efficiency with some of these smaller backs that we're going to be honed in on, and he definitely displays that in spades. It's insane, like just some of his yards per touch numbers and everything. So definitely on board there with Etienne. And I think we're all kind of really have come around on Javonte Williams as well. I mean, he was top 5 in yards after contact, top 5 in 15+ yard carries this year. Also forced the most missed tackles in 2020, according to PFF as well. And, I have a little bit of concerns about him with long speed Javonte Williams, just because the big plays were such a big part of his success in college. You always want to make sure that, that's one that because like you're saying about combine, like we're kind of just setting thresholds. Like if he was to run slower than 4.6, maybe I would be worried. If he runs anything faster, I have zero concerns about his long speed really. And getting into the next guy here, because Javonte Williams is going to come down. I think you're going to get a steal in rookie drafts if he catches passes in the NFL. If he doesn't, it's going to be nebulous or whatever. But the next guy is definitely going to catch passes at the next level. Kenneth Gainwell, come on down. So, Dave, Kenneth Gainwell from the recent running back factory in Memphis, also known for the run schemes and running everything out of shotgun. He's also one of the running backs. He sat out the entire 2020 season while guys like Javonte Williams blew up. But for the next level, what we have here is what looks like a satellite back. So where do you stand on running backs like Gainwell, Dave? Because the fantasy community seems to really like them. Happens with a lot of these types of running backs, and you have to ask sometimes if we like them more than the NFL teams will.
Yeah, I think you put that perfectly. From just looking at his production, his 53 receptions or 51 catches in his he only had really one season. He only played 4 something games in his age 19 season. And that one season that he had 51 catches is pretty special for a running back. And I was talking to my friend, Zach Reed from the Dynasty Dummies podcast, and who did a lot of film work on him. And he has the ability to catch back shoulder patches out of the slot. So it's not like he's just catching dump offs. He can run routes and has the ability while running downfield to catch it back shoulder, which is a pretty impressive skill for a running back. But let's throw some water on that fire a little bit and just say that he might be only in the 185 pounds. Like that might be realistic. Now I've seen other things where could be 195, 191 pounds. And maybe in this year that he had off, and it wasn't like he just opted out because he had a good season. He had 4 relatives that pass away from COVID. So it wasn't like I had one good season and I'm just going to bank on that in the NFL. So this this young man had a lot of trauma. So I just want to put that out there. But what's special about Gainwell is he does it all. He does it catching the ball. He had over 600 receiving yards, if I remember correctly. He had 2,000 all-purpose yards in that one season, and did have 16 attempts per game, which is pretty decent for a guy of his size and could handle the load. Draft capital is going to be the big telltale sign, and also his weigh-ins are going to be important. But at this part of the process, when I'm just checking off things, because I don't have a weight anywhere in my database for him, because I don't have a weight for any of these prospects yet. I'm just doing hearsay, and I don't trust any college reports or whatever like that from teams. So, but from what I've seen from his yardage standpoint, from his yards per attempt standpoint, his receiving ability, he's scored a lot of touchdowns as well. He analytically is exciting, and that's probably going to be tempered a little bit, but he could be. I thought for a second he was going to be a steal in rookie drafts because everyone was poo-pooing his size, but people are still putting him in the early second round. I think once we have him weigh in, or if he doesn't get the draft capital, if he goes later in the second, early third round rookie drafts, I'm still hopping over him there, because he could be one of those players that if he gets opportunity because of an injury, or the lead back goes down in some kind of committee, he could carry you for 4 or 5 weeks because of injury and gain more of that opportunity share.
And that's the total upside is what you mentioned. Like, should he be split out to the slot by his, weaponized by a team who drafts him in this age of positionless football? I think that's super interesting. And Memphis recruited Gainwell as a wide receiver. I think he played quarterback in high school, if I remember. And yeah, I think it'll come down to like landing spot draft capital, pass protection for guys who hope to be in there on third down. Another guy who's somewhat similar, but I think it's interesting how much lower he is on almost every set of rankings, is Michael Carter. He is the aforementioned teammate of Javonte Williams. And Mr. Carter out of North Carolina has a lot of similar drawbacks that Kenneth Gainwell comes with from like a typical prototype running back standpoint. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons rushing for this kid. And he had the most big plays on the ground, most 15-plus yard carries this past season. And for a little guy, he was hard to bring down. He forced lots of missed tackles, put up some yards after contact too. But Dave, what say you? Do you think Michael Carter is another running back destined to be just a change of pace guy at the next level?
My brain is telling me most likely he's not going to be I have a hard time seeing him being a lead in a committee type role. I think he's going to be the third down back / just the secondary running back on a team. If maybe as a ceiling, I don't know, but that's kind of what my mind tells me. But then I think he came in over 200 pounds at the Senior Bowl, if I remember correctly. He was able to split carries with Javonte Williams, who had him in size, and to be able to do that is impressive. So as another NFL caliber back, he split the opportunities down the middle. So that shows you something what his college team thinks about him. And then the most important thing that jumps off the page for me is 3 seasons over 20 receptions, 2 with 25 receptions. So he does more profile as the RB2, but that receiving floor is attractive. Kind of, and I like similar to what Gainwell, I was kind of saying, like how he could come in and spell, for instance, he could be that Giovanni Bernard who the Joe Mixon goes down and you can rely on Michael Carter. However, Gio was a better prospect, honestly, but Michael Carter, it's tough to get exciting about him, but I'm sure as I learn more about him in the process too, because I'm just looking at a spreadsheet, there are positives. There's some people that I've been talking to that said that he was the better back in that backfield last year. I'm not sure if I agree, but he's an interesting. I just think it shows you compared to last year how quickly these backs are falling off here. We're talking about a lot of holes at this point, and this is what the 4th running back we've talked about. So, so that's kind of depressing.
Guys, and they're pretty small guys too, because I'm getting to efficiency because he was a very efficient guy on his touches, and that's another thing in the database. By the way, the prospect profile or prospect database is fantasy points per touch. By the way, I like that as well. And that's another where Etienne just jumps off the page, by the way, but so does Gainwell and Michael Carter. So they kind of, they get overshadowed a bit. And frankly, Michael Carter is below those two in a lot of those efficiency metrics, but Michael Carter does have that ultra young breakout age, by the way, as well. Speaking of breakout, let's go to Chuba Hubbard, taller, skinnier back out of Oklahoma State, a polarizing guy in fantasy circles. What the hell are we doing with them? What the hell is he doing playing college football last year? Actually though, Dave, what do we do with a guy like this, with somebody who had over 2,000 rushing yards and over 20 rushing touchdowns in 2019, and then comes back and puts his final season on paper that he did last year?
In my opinion, Chuba, whatever he is called, whatever he goes by, the running back from Oklahoma State, he has the highest ceiling, in my opinion, in this class. I think he was the only back in this class of the people that we're talking about tonight anyway, who had a season of over 20 attempts per game. He had 25 attempts per game in that special season. That just shows you he can handle the load. Over 2,000, like you said, over 2,000 yards from scrimmage that season, and then the touchdowns. But then he's had 2 seasons over 20 receptions. That shows me that he's got that 3-down potential, which is exciting. Now, I've heard people like Katie Flower she came on and talked to Mike Fanaro for the Rookie Fever, and she said maybe he's not quite the 3-down, but he could definitely be the lead in any type of split backfield, like maybe a 60% to 40% type opportunity share. That excites me because he has the sprinting ability. Now, is he Canadian? I believe, right?
You know it.
You know it.
Come on, guys. I should have led with this. So that's why he's the RB1.
Woo! He was almost an Olympic-style athlete for Canadians track team, right?
That's right.
Yeah, exactly. So I should mention that he's got that. That's a big plus in any prospect profile. I should actually put a column in the database for that. Is he Canadian or not? Because I think that helped Chase Claypool, right? So
absolutely, yeah.
So there we go.
Clay stole his thunder, though. It was like only one, super stud performance we were allowed to have by a Canadian last year, skill player wise.
So Chuba's going to take the reins. He's going to carry the torch for Canadians this year. That's my feeling. He's the best value at this point in the process. I have been in 2 mocks where he has gone in the 3rd round in Superflex.
Mm-hmm.
Unbelievable. Now I know that we don't have all the information. That's going to change as people get more information like draft capital and workout metrics and yada yada. But I'm sorry, that upside should not be found in the 3rd round. I think he probably goes in late 1st round, early 2nd round when everything's said and done, because he's got the speed, he's got everything I mentioned. He's got that type of upside is special. And then if we want to say, well, why, like potentially you can explain it away. And this is, I like to supplement the numbers with this, is that I think he didn't have a single offensive lineman return from the year before. Or if he did, it was only one starting offensive lineman return from the year before. And he was dealing with some kind of injuries, I believe. And there was some turmoil in the offseason with the coach.
He clearly wasn't as explosive.
Yeah. So I'm not going to sit here and doubt his speed because it's real. I think he's the biggest. He could be that he could win fantasy drafts people next year. That's how if he hits and where he's going, he's going to win people. He's going to change fantasy teams.
I love it. You said upside. He's going to hit big if he hits, like all the points I want to make for sure, because he might be the guy who's going to move the most depending on landing spot, not even necessarily draft capital. I don't anticipate he gets drafted super high. I'll be thrilled if he squeezes into those top 3 rounds of the NFL draft. But my point is that with all these offenses, all are running outside zone schemes, like literally almost half the league at this point. A whole bunch of them just installed after the coaching carousel this offseason. So there are literally a handful of offenses out there that are, a bunch of them are desperate for running back too. And he would just be absolutely perfect in the Jets, Falcons, any system that just came in and implemented this system. I think they'd be laughing if they can pick up Chuba Hubbard in the 4th round or something. And I think he could experience that confluence of events that sends him just soaring up my running back rankings, like landing spot, draft capital, everything. And I think he really encapsulates the whole mantra that it isn't necessarily that running backs don't matter. It's that situation just matters so much more for 95% of running backs. But I digress because we're leaving Trav hanging here forever. So last guy in the running backs here is Trey Sermon from Ohio State. What are your thoughts on him? And maybe feel free to throw a sleeper running back or a guy you want to plant a flag on or anything as we cap off the running backs here.
So nothing stands out. I almost just said, let's talk about the next player because he's just really boring.
Me too.
He has one season with 14.5 rush attempts per game. He has a different season with 16 rush attempts. For me, I think why he's always mentioned here and why he's so high in initial ranks is because people recognize him. The 2 programs he's been in college have a lot of primetime access. I think it was Oklahoma. I think he was on beforehand, and now he was on Ohio State. Mm-hmm. It's tough to get. It just as he probably profiles as the 1st and 2nd down grinder backup. Like that's what there's nothing that stands out to me that's exciting at all with Sermon.
Agreed.
And as far as I didn't really have one as far as a running back that kind of stands out. I wouldn't, there's a couple, but I'm not going to really speak to them because I don't have enough stuff off the top of my head. So there are a couple players that you can have in later on that actually his name's dropping for me, but he was a JUCO transfer, big guy. He had a marijuana suspension, but when he came back, he was dominant. So that's one guy that a lot of people are buzzing about. But yeah, so I love kind of in my 4th round throwing darts at small school guys who handle the heavy work share and have receiving upside. That's a fun thing to do with my rookie picks is because if they get that opportunity, that's, you can trade it and turn it into a 3rd round pick right away. Like that's just an easy turn of profit in Dynasty.
Yeah, I think you might even be able to get more than a 3rd round pick for some of those running backs, especially if they boom. Sometimes if you hit it the right time, people give you a second for those guys, and then if that boom flames out, you're reaping that reward.
Well said.
Okay, fellas. So yeah, and Ty, you don't have to worry about leaving me hanging, my man, because I'm going to run us through the wide receivers now. So no need to worry about that. I was enjoying just listening and soaking it up because truth be told, running back is probably my favorite position in fantasy. I'm a big running back stockpiler. So I love what you said there about those dart throws at the end of rookie drafts, Dave. But I'm going to take us into this wide receiver class here. This is looking like a pretty deep wide receiver class. Lots of really good players, lots of good profiles. There isn't a ton of size at the top, I've noticed, but I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are. Like Ty was asking what your thoughts are on the running back class overall. I'm curious to hear the same as to what you think about the wide receiver class.
In my opinion, the wide receivers make this class. It's the deepest position in this class. And I don't think it's as good as 2020's class was. I mean, it's really hard. How are you going to have a class that was better than Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, Gabby Davis, and like that's even Jalen Reagor. Yeah. There's Mims. There's all you can go down the list. It's really tough to beat
Mooney.
that. Mooney was Mooney. I was high on Mooney too. Like it's tough to beat that class. Now people are telling me that this class is as good or better. And I think it's because these players and a lot of people who watch the film are saying that because you have some players who aren't as dominant from an analytical perspective, but might jump off the page when you're watching the film, like a Waddle or a Devonta Smith. I mean, Devonta Smith had numbers later in his career, but more of the film watching community gets more excited about that than maybe someone who's looking for the earlier breakouts and stuff like that. So I think, Ty mentioned it, but I don't think I've mentioned breakout age all freaking episode. And that's like a sin for me. I love talking breakout age, and I really care about that with wide receivers. We have a lot of younger wide receivers, a lot of early declares in this class. Off the top, I can't remember off the top of my head, but we at least 5 early declares that are going to be 21-year-old rookies. Actually, 5 in this, just in the section you guys want to talk about tonight.
Mm-hmm.
It's impressive.
And we saw that last year too, where a lot of those young guys were also the top heavy guys like Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, Judy, and all them. Yeah.
And so I see here too, like this year, because of how COVID is, it is actually more difficult. This is is going to be the most difficult year since I've been doing rookie evaluation. So for like 8 or 9 years, this is probably the most difficult year that I'm going to have evaluating rookies because of players who sat out, of players who only played 4 games while other conferences were playing 12 games.
Yeah.
It's a tricky season. And that's why the market share, why the yards per attempt, the per game numbers, and relying on breakout age, that's why this stuff is important, because you can compare how they did as a percentage of their offense much easier than you can compare someone who had over 1,400 receiving yards because they played a full season, someone who only had 500 receiving yards. It's very challenging, but I think analytically, this is my favorite position to do because there's so many small school guys, and I think wide receivers, it's just so fun to plant a flag on, and it's my favorite position to evaluate because there are so many different types of wide receivers. They come from so many different backgrounds. And so many different types hit. Like Brandon Ayuk, he wasn't a guy that I was really high on last year, but he did have the draft capital and he took off. It's just fun how how people from different perspectives, the film watching community, how different their evaluation process. And it just makes this experience fun because they just have such different competing points of view. And this is my favorite. I love talking wide receivers. So I'm excited to do this.
Well, I think a cool piece about that too, you mentioned like the film folks versus the data heavy guys. I would consider Ty data heavy and Brandon Ayuk was his boy. So I think that's another cool thing about the wide receiver position is that we can pull different things. And like you said, plant flags on different guys. And there's just so many more. We start more in fantasy, and there's just more, and obviously the different profiles that can be successful, like you're talking about. That I have a lot of fun with the wide receivers too, which is why I had a blast kind of getting ready for this segment. So, and actually, just really quick, you mentioned the young recruits. I just looked through the Spaceman Raw database, of course, and it showed 13 21-year-old rookies coming in next year for the 2021 draft class. So that's a lot of young players. So going to be some long-standing dynasty pieces, of course. So getting into some of those players, Dave, we're talking about the top two, obviously, Ja'Marr Chase and Devonta Smith. They are the consensus top two. I'm curious as to how you have those two stacking up against each other as far as your rankings, and maybe if you have any other wide receivers who might be breaking into that tier for you.
So at this stage in the process, Devonta Smith is not in my top two wide receivers. I have him as maybe my 4 or 5. I could maybe get him at 3 if I really I'm not strictly a numbers person. I take a lot in, that's my first approach is I get all the data and I look at it from that point of view. And then I have people that I rely on, like my co-host Todd Foster, who does a lot more film, Zach Reed, who I had on Rookie Fever recently. And Jay Mike Check. Those are some people I really rely on for their film analysis. And I supplement it and I see how those 2 points of view mesh, and I go from there. So that's why a lot of data people despise Devonta Smith. I'm not quite that extreme, so I'm willing to listen more with Devonta Smith, but Ja'Marr Chase is my far and away wide receiver 1 in this class. I have him over the running. I love running backs. My whole philosophy is built around running backs and rookie drafts. I'm taking Ja'Marr Chase ahead of every other position player in this class. He is the real deal. He did at age 19 in a major top 5 conference with serious talent on that team. He dominated across the board. And the big keyword is he had the 19 breakout age, over 30% threshold, which is what RotoViz lives by. I'm not necessarily sold on the 30%, but the fact that he did it, heck yeah, let's go, baby. He does it all the way that he's got every stat. It's elite. When I'm thinking about, I'm not even looking at my notes here. I'm just going off of it's impressive. I'm looking back at the notes here, but yeah, Ja'Marr Chase, I only need 1 year too from him because he did it, and he did it at a young age, and he did it I'm just going to start repeating myself, but because he's far and away my number 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I have Ja'Marr Chase as number 1 as well. And that season was enough. That was a crazy season. He was getting targets all over the field. I was checking it out today. He had over 8 yards after the catch per reception on 84 receptions that season. So that is insane. And he outperformed Justin Jefferson, obviously, in a prolific offense. He just outdid Justin Jefferson in that season, and we saw what Justin Jefferson did as a rookie. I'm not saying that's necessarily going to be exactly mirrored by Ja'Marr Chase, but he is the type of receiver that can put up numbers like that. So he's my 1 as well. I think at this point, I do have Devonta Smith as my wide receiver 2, but I still have a little bit more film to watch on some of these guys, and I want to dig into some more of that data as well. So I'm actually going to move into some of these next guys, Dave. A lot of people are talking about Smith. A lot of people are talking about Chase. I want to talk a little bit about Jaylen Waddle. Major speed, not a whole lot of market share. Looking at the database, of course, he had some really big names ahead of him on the depth chart. And this past season, he didn't get a full season in as well. So lots of injuries for Jaylen Waddle in 2020. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, I've seen the comp, Dave. I have seen people comp him to Tyreek Hill. I can see certain similarities, certain ones, but not so far that I would necessarily comp them. Is his ceiling really what we've seen from Tyreek Hill, or is that a little bit lofty, would you say?
From my perspective, it is lofty. I have to really squint when I see the data. So scrim yards per team play, he does not hit the threshold. A 0.7 career average is what I shoot for scrim yards per play or yards per attempt. And that's really that's my go-to. If I'm going to brass tacks time, what I'm really going to rely on, scrim yards per play is probably the most effective production metric that I have. And I look at that career average wise. and that's really effective tool as a quick, just a easy tool to use. And he doesn't hit that threshold. Now you can squint and he doesn't, and then you pair that with, he does not have a breakout age. It is really difficult to be a successful wide receiver to not have a breakout age. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but we're talking like 15% type, you have to really, really be an outlier to hit that. Now, I will say, if I was to go to a per game dominator or a per game yards per attempt for Waddle, I could make a case that he would have broken out this year if he had gotten injured. So it's pretty harsh to say that he wouldn't have broken out. So we could squint and give him that breakout age. But the thing is too, I understand why people like him from looking at on the film, why he jumps off the page. And and I haven't mentioned this tonight, but returning kicks in college for running backs and for wide receivers is predictive of future NFL success. You saw people identify Antonio Brown. You got to see other players historically that what it does is it shows dynamism because it incorporates like their playmaking ability. If your team, you're a college level team and you're picking one player to go out there and handle the ball and try to score on every single, and change the course of your game, and field position matters and all that stuff. You're picking one player to do that. And Jaylen Waddle was the one player to do that at one of the most highly prestigious universities in college football. Yeah. So I do take that into account with Jaylen Waddle. Unfortunately, just because there are players that I like more, before I have no draft capital, even when I do no draft capital, he's going to be one of those players like, you know what? Good. You can take Jaylen Waddle because he wasn't going to be on I don't have him ranked as highly as other people. And that can have other players fall to me, like maybe a Rondale Moore, a Tylan Wallace, Elijah Moore, and those type of players.
Yeah, I like what you said about the return stuff there, and it kind of bears out in the example you mentioned, Antonio Brown. We used to see him light teams up on screen plays, running through an entire defense to go for touchdowns. That's his kick return ability right there. And I think Jaylen Waddle definitely does have that. And another little bit of a similarity that I saw in Jaylen Waddle is that when he does have to go up for a ball, he's pretty good at doing so for his size. And I think Tyreek Hill has a lot of that as well, the way he positions his body and just like can sky for a guy who's that height. I think Jaylen Waddle has a little bit of that, but I am a little bit hesitant to say that he has that ceiling as well, because that situation is just fantastic for Tyreek Hill as well with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And who's to say that Jaylen Waddle is necessarily going to fall into a situation like that. So another guy you mentioned there, Dave, was Rashod Bateman. He is a curious one for me. I think one kind of thing that I'm noticing about this class is a lot of these guys are coming out from the shadow of really big name players. You obviously have, Jamar Chase with Justin Jefferson previously and then not playing. You got the Bama guys who are always loaded atop the depth chart, and then Jaylen Waddle. And then Rashod Bateman was behind Tyler Johnson. He had a really big season alongside Johnson 2 seasons ago. 2020 wasn't as good, but I'm curious if you think Rashod Bateman, with his size, because Tyler Johnson obviously played in the slot, but Bateman was moved around a little bit more after Tyler Johnson left. I'm curious if you think that Rashod Bateman does profile as an outside receiver in the NFL, or do you think he is somebody who might be suited to move around, which could be more beneficial for his fantasy production?
So that's something that outside of my ability really with the numbers. Because it's just, I just can't get that from the data that I have. I know PFF has some data that I have access to that, and that can show me a little bit more like ADOT and things along that nature. But from he hits a lot of major thresholds, 3 years, over 25% percentage of his college offense. If you average the receiving yards and receiving touchdowns. So he hits a lot of important thresholds, broke out at age 18. That's incredibly impressive. Now his volume is not like but then you look at his PPR points, and PPR points don't really matter as much for wide receivers as they do running backs, but he just didn't quite hit the ceiling. Never eclipsed 20, I believe, if off the top of my head, points per game, PPR points. So I think if I were to say, without knowing his draft capital, knowing his conference and how he does again versus other players from his conference that are drafted, his numbers might not be as impressive as some other players here, but it's still pretty free. His production profile is pretty good. Like there's no, he is a player that I definitely want in my, as a target. The thing is I'm seeing people have him all over the place. I'm having some people who like analytics. I think Peter Howard might have him as his wide receiver 2. I've seen other film watchers have him as their maybe wide receiver 4 or 5. There's saying that he doesn't maybe do a lot, like doesn't jump off the page, but he does everything well. I think he has probably a nice floor in the NFL. I would like his floor, but who's to say that he doesn't have a high ceiling as well? Because he just has his age adjusted production is phenomenal, and he made improvements. He improved, or a little dip last year, but he still made it like from year 18 to 19, he improved. And I like me some Rondale Moore. Not Rondale Moore. Sorry. Yeah, I do love Rondale Moore, but Rashod Bateman it's tough I just don't get quite as excited as I do about a couple of these wide receivers.
I think I'm feeling the same way about him. From what I've watched and then the data that I've looked at, like I definitely see some versatility in him, and I hope that he does go somewhere where he could be moved around because I like his size for someone being moved around. But yeah, I think the jury's still out for me so far on being able to say he is like my wide receiver 3 or anything like that. But I think he probably will fall within that like 3 to 5 range for me, probably. But yeah, I was a big fan of Tyler Johnson coming out last year, so maybe it turns into like a Minnesota wide receiver things, just like those Memphis running backs, Ty. But yeah, I hope he can do it because he does look like he could be a really good player if he's given the touches. You talked about this next guy that you really, really like, Dave. That's Rondale Moore. This guy's fast. He's a little undersized, but he has a sick game. So I just want to not even ask you any specific question. I just want you to talk about Rondale Moore and your thoughts on him.
So he's my wide receiver 2 in this class right now. Dominant age 18 breakout season, 37% of his college offense with the receiving touchdowns and receiving yards market share. He had all 3 of his seasons. He had over 20 PPR points per game. He had, in that age 18 season, he had 1.62 yards per team attempt, and that is elite level. And it just shows it's a mixture. And I haven't really talked about it much, but yards per attempt or scrim yards per play, however you want to phrase it, is it combines efficiency along with volume into it's one of the better, because efficiency metrics don't really work, especially in college or in the NFL, but yards per attempt combines the both of them together and is just incredibly effective when you're prospecting and for the NFL too. So the issue is that he had injuries in year 2. And so he only played 4 games, I think. And then last year he opted back in this season, very awkward situation. But talking to my man, Zach Reed, he said that everything that he saw in his rookie year, he was doing in the games that he actually played. And everything that he said that he saw in the film, he's going to be able to create a ton of separation. He's going to not need to be schemed up. He's not going to have to be like a Tavon Austin or anything like that. He's going to be able to create for himself big playability. He can score. He can do a lot. And I think what I like most about Rondale Moore is his price. There's some people who are high on him like me or like Zach Reed, but other people don't have him until the early second round in their Superflex drafts. I don't have to pay the Jamar Chase price to get Rondale Moore. And I think he's got an amazing PPR floor because he's going to vacuum up targets at the NFL level. And someone who does an NFL team who takes more, they're going to like him. Like they're drafting him to play him how he plays. They're not like trying to fit him as an outside wide receiver who plays down the field. They're going to draft him to play him like he played in college. And size does not matter at all as far as NFL ability. I mentioned this early on, and I just want to reiterate it. There is nothing in my database that says that size matters as far as fantasy production. It doesn't matter. BMI, it doesn't matter. I don't want to go down that road either. But yeah, size. I mean, Rondale Moore has a great BMI too, but it just doesn't matter. He can succeed at his height because of the way he plays and the skills that he has on the field. I love me some Rondale Moore. I wish I could say more about him besides just breakout age. I think he's going to get the draft capital. I think I love Rondale Moore.
So I hope any of the ladies watching out there heard that. Size does not matter. Sorry, I had to. No, that's good. And I like what you said there about the way that the team is going to draft him, because the good thing about him is that you know that it's cut and dry what he's going to be used at in the NFL. You don't have to worry about whether he's going to be misused. You know that he's going to come into that slot role, and you know that that will ideally lead to a bunch of volume as long as he's getting the playing time, which he definitely will. I'm curious, where do you think he could get drafted in the NFL draft? Like, where do you think the NFL teams are going to draft him?
I personally think he has the best. I think he has the widest range of landing spots that I would get excited for. I think he could play with a Justin Herbert out in LA. That would be exciting to go along with. In that offense, you've got there's a lot of options there, but Zach Reed mentioned Buffalo in our podcast recently. I really like that idea of taking over the what's his name? Cole Beasley. Yeah. Diggs, Moore and Josh Allen. Like, yeah, that's exciting to me. And my personal favorite, I really would love to pair him with Tua because Tua is pretty good at that short, immediate game. And Rondale Moore can get some yak and just really add a lot to that Miami offense. So a lot of play. And then, like, I'm a Pats fan. I would love him on the Pats. So yeah, a lot of places that I would love to have Rondale Moore. I can't really think of a place that I wouldn't want him. Maybe Cleveland if
T.Y. Hilton replacement. No, thank you.
Yeah, oh my God.
Yeah. Usage wise. Because I loved what you said about the usage with it. I thought that was a really good point to make with Rondale.
Mm-hmm. Another one I'll throw out there, just because I've been kind of liking the thought of one of these slot after the catch guys going there, is Green Bay as the number 2 to Devonta Adams. That could be really nice in that window of Aaron Rodgers that they've got left.
Cobb, like Cobb reincarnated, like Cobb in his prime. That would be exciting.
Yeah, new toy for A-Rod, hopefully. Totally opposite end of the physical makeup category, or whatever you want to call it. Terrace Marshall Jr. out of LSU, Dave. This is one of the few guys that we've mentioned who has some size. He's 6'3", I believe. Tall, lean playmaker. I think he's got pretty smooth speed. But yeah, he's, he didn't get a ton of production, not like a huge season by any means, but he did have a lot of touchdown production, which was really nice. I was seeing almost a little bit of DJ Chark in him when I was watching him. I probably should look a little bit more. But I think there's like a lot of raw talent, didn't have that full blow up, say, yardage season. But I'm curious how you see him. Do you see him similar to that kind of raw, big talent, or is he more polished than I'm thinking?
So the way I see him is that I was actually just told this recently. I think he stopped. Didn't he like opt out like halfway through the season?
Yeah, after 7 games.
So yeah, I saw the 7 games. I didn't know if he got injured or whatever. So he opted out, but he still broke out at age 20, even after he broke out. That just shows me and my threshold. So people want to say like 18 age breakout. Oh, that must mean he's a better player than someone who broke out at age 20. I don't necessarily believe that. I don't think that age is. I don't really think because someone's 18.9 years old means that, or they're better than someone who's 20.8 years old. I don't think age is used. I don't think age is a skill-based metric. Like, because you're 0.3 years older than someone that you're better than them. I don't, that doesn't make sense to me. I know it helps for modeling purposes, but where you're born on the calendar doesn't make sense to me. But what does matter with Mitchell is that I find age 18 to 20 breakouts, that's the window that you want to hit. So he hits that check mark. So that's good that he did it. And I haven't been able to find like a teammate metric or anything like that shows like that teammates matter for when I'm prospecting, but he did have 2 amazing players on his team. And when they weren't there, he took over. So maybe I understand why people like him. He's probably not going to be as high in my board as how other people might have him who watch a lot more film, but he hit, at least he broke out. He's not like there are some players where I'm like, people like Tony, I think his name is. I don't see it with him at all. And at least with Marshall, I'm like, okay, I get it. I get what you guys are seeing that I might not be seeing with him. So.
Yeah, and I think kind of to add to that with the Jefferson and Chase being ahead of him on the depth chart, he had Clyde Edwards-Helaire catching 55 balls in 2019 as well. So, that's a lot of guys commanding targets to weed through. And in those 7 games this year, he actually led the team in receiving yards still without playing a full season. So I think that's a nice little feather. And then if you look at some of that market share stuff, he had over 23% of the receiving yards and over 40% of the team's receiving touchdowns in only 7 games. So I think there is some really big upside for me so far of the guys that I've dug into. I think he could have some of the bigger upside just with that size as well and potential contested catch and red zone weaponry. But I'm curious to see where how high he goes in the draft. And I think landing spot could be a big piece for Terrace Marshall as well. But yeah, LSU always produces those nice wide receivers. So I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on him to see, maybe that late 2nd round, maybe early 3rd round pick, depending on landing spot. But maybe, I might be underestimating what drafters are thinking.
On Shane Swagger, my other co-host on Rookie Fever podcast, he had Mike Hicks or Matt Hicks. I think it's
Matt, from the Dynasty Draft
Hicks.
Room, I believe.
Yeah. The Draft Bible too.
Yeah. He's on a bunch of stuff.
I think they're now with SI. He really likes Marshall, and that was a really good episode too for Rookie Profile and Rookie Fever. So there's a lot of people, and then Todd, my co-host on Tail 2 Rivals, really likes him. I think he was a 5-star recruit, if I'm not mistaken. That could be just.
Yeah,
I might not. Sure. I'm not. I could be wrong on that one, but there's a lot of Devy people
for sure, though.
Yeah, Devy people really like him, and a lot of people I respect like him. So. I'm willing to listen on now. I'm not going to ever put him above. So even if Marshall gets better draft capital than Rondale Moore, unless Rondale Moore is 5th, 6th round, there's no way that I'm going to ever have Marshall over Rondale Moore. There's just no way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Completely different players too, but definitely a lot more raw on the Marshall end from what I've seen so far. The last guy we're going to talk about here, and I am going to ask for a sleeper wide receiver after we do this. So I guess maybe not the last guy we're going to talk about, but the second last, Amon-Ra St. Brown out of UFC. For me, he's going to be another member of a future member of the Acronym Boys. This is kind of a maybe not quite a boy band, but an NFL crew that goes by acronyms. So there's Equanimous St. Brown, ESB, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, MVS, and now we have Amon-Ra St. Brown. So I guess it's going to be ARSB. So after digressing through all of that, I think
really
personally for me,
that one out.
Yeah, I see what you did. Personally for me, I'm not too sure what to think about his data just yet. I think from watching some of the film that I've watched, he's best suited as a slot player. And, he played there for the most part in 2019, but much like I was talking about Rondale or Rashod Bateman earlier, how after Tyler Johnson left, he moved around a little bit more. After Michael Pittman left, Amon-Ra St. Brown moved a lot more as well. I'm curious what you think about his profile and how he projects in the NFL. It's going to be one of those low ADOT kind of target hog slot guys, or can you do a little bit more, do you think?
So it's funny that you said that he's a low ADOT guy, because the way I look at it, he doesn't have a ton of receptions, but just the way that his profile was, I would have actually guessed that he was more of an air yards guy, but I guess he is close to the line of scrimmage. So that just shows you how I rely on film people like what you're telling me to tell me that. But what stands out for me with the ARSB,
nice.
is
nice. It's catching on, Ty. I'm telling you, it's gonna freaking catch on, man.
I didn't stutter too bad either with that, so I'll that's something. But yeah, ARSB, he has the age 18 breakout age. Yeah, give it to me. And I actually see Gymnastic. Shout out to Gymnastic. Actually, shout out to a lot of people in the chat. A lot of great people. I saw Dingus in there. I saw Toronto Dave, Shout out to everyone in the TN or in your chat. There are a lot of great guys here tonight.
Throw out Zach Reed's Twitter as well, if you don't mind. I think it's at TikTok, TikTassin or whatever.
At Tacit Assassin. Yeah.
Tacit. Okay. I always wondered if it was a hard C or a soft C, but now we know.
Ditto.
There is some kind of inside joke with that because most people think it's tactic, but it is Tacit Assassin. Yeah. So I forget the actual. Early on, they explained it on the Dynasty Dummies, but I forget. But yeah, Zach Reed, he's a go-to for me. He is essential in my process. Actually,
a great follow on Twitter, like a must-have follow for sure.
He's from Maine. Hey, we shout out a bunch of Canadian guys. He's another Maine guy, so shout out to. He's actually further north for me, where he's from in Maine. He's from yeah, he's a true, well, not quite a true northerner, but yeah, he's a Mainer. So, but anyway, back to ARSB. What's great about him is that he has the age 18 breakout age, and he did take kind of. What's interesting is that he has a big jump in TDs. They didn't play as many games. I think was he from USC? I think so. That's Pac-12. So they played fewer games because of what was going on on the West Coast with COVID. So whenever I see a huge TD, because I think he has something like a 40%, 43% market share, combined market share this past season, and that's heavily weighted in TDs, and on a small sample size, that's just a little head scratcher. But he's a popular. He's a name people like a lot. I've seen people talk about him a lot. What I see, age 18 breakout age, he's got decent percentage of his offense. His scrim yards per play are pretty solid. Like their career average is over 1. It's 1.12. Career average for scrim yards is good. And he's got, he had over 21 PPR points per game his last season. He's a 3-year declare, or he's an early declare, age 21 rookie. That's kind of how I meant where the process. I don't have a ton without draft capital and without landing spot. So numbers wise, yeah, is he a target of mine? No, but I'm definitely thinking about him the second round, mid second round of drafts. Yeah, I like me some ARSB. See, once you say it a couple of times, it really starts to flow.
It's a little bit better. Yeah, it's maybe a little bit clunkier than ESB, but it's not far off.
Throw air yards in that sense. It's going to get tougher though.
Air yards.
Because the air yards for ARSB, I think you were onto something there, Trav. I'm just looking on PFF Air. He had 4 deep catches all season, which is ranked tied for 120th. I know they did definitely have a scaled back season, but yeah, 10 targets, 20 yards downfield, 10 to 19. He had 14 targets. 24 of his targets were in the 1 to 9 yard range downfield. A little bit of quarterback play in there. And I think personally, Amon-Ra St. Brown is actually like a really high upside prospect. Like I actually am kind of interested in him from a fantasy perspective, especially. And who were you guys talking about before? Wondering about if they were a 5-star recruit.
Terrace Marshall.
Yeah. So he was, and so was Amon-Ra St. Brown. They were both 5-star recruits coming out of high school from 247.
And one last thing about ARSB is he had a lot of, not a ton, but he was over 20 returns in college. He had a little dynamism. I mean, USC is a big time college program, and he was one of their playmakers that they wanted getting the ball so on special teams. So that is a plus in his corner as well.
Yeah, the thing I liked was versatility. Like he didn't get a bunch of receptions downfield, but he ran some routes down there, and you did see him go up a little bit. I didn't see him have to fight for balls downfield very much at all. So I want to see a little bit more of that. I've got to watch some more of his games. From what I've seen, I haven't seen that from him, but I do like some of that versatility in seeing that he was moved around a little bit more in 2020, as opposed to like almost over. I think it was over 95% of his snaps were from the slot in 2019.
Yeah, it was like 750 of his like 840 something snaps in the slot.
Yeah, so
and then 25% or so this past season.
And he looked like he had pretty quick feet after the catch as well. His yards after the catch numbers actually aren't very good, but I think he can do some of that. In 2019, it was a lot better for him. Actually, he had 414 of his 1,042 yards after the catch. So he can do it. He just didn't necessarily have that pan out for him in 2020. Very good, Dave. So I think I want to get a sleeper wide receiver from you. Somebody whose data maybe pops out, or somebody who you think might not be talked about as much. What are you thinking?
So quickly before I get into my sleeper, there's 3 players that weren't mentioned here: Tylan Wallace, Elijah Moore, Diami Brown. Those are 3 players that I have circled as that I can't wait to see what the draft capital is. I want to see how, I want to see how they run, how their athleticism is. Now, athleticism, like I said, overrated, but I still like, I like to see it anyway. It's fun. But I like seeing the bar graphs on playerprofiler.com. So, but
shout out to Master June 70. Our buddy Mark is actually the designer of the player profile graphics.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
So, but that being said, so Linda Lyons, who's I sees in the chat now, that's her boy from Oklahoma State. I have Tylan Wallace. I'm struggling who I like more, Devonta Smith or Tylan Wallace right now. I really like Tylan Wallace. So, and that's someone who I'm probably targeting very high in the second round of my drafts. So, but moving on to my actual sleeper is Isaiah McCoy out of Kent State. And I think that's the MAC conference. He is also he's a early declare, age 21 rookie. He played 3 seasons at Kent State. I think at Kent State. I have 3 seasons. I could look to see where he played before last season. But yeah, graduated from Kent State. So what he did is he got better every single season. He broke out at age 19 and he had finished. Sorry, I'm looking here. He actually had an age or a 30% threshold breakout too. He was over 30% of their offense and 35% as a true junior. So and very exciting what McCoy is doing there too. And he had a average. He hit an important 0.95 career average scrim yards per play, and he had his final season at Kent State. Now that's a small program, so you have to realize that there aren't as many great players as at like an LSU or whatever, what have you. But he had, in his final season, he had over 25.1 PPR points per game. He had some return ability. So yeah, Isaiah McCoy right now is my small school guy. Peter Howard and Jarek Backus, I think, is those are 2 guys who are high on him as well too. But yeah, I really like some. We're running. Okay, yeah, there we go. Isaiah McCoy.
I love it.
I just got the message about we're going too long.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I was just checking. We are totally game to go long on the True North pod, my man. I was just checking if you're good to go long. So, yeah, let's keep on ripping, my friend. I love what you said about Diami Brown there. He's kind of one that I'm looking at as well. We were going to sneak some more wide receivers on the sheet, but as you can tell, we got to keep our time crunch down. I just love the back-to-back 1,000-yard receiving seasons out of Brown, as well as 20 touchdowns the last 2 years, improved after the catch, improved on his drop. So that's somebody that I'm looking at beyond those guys that we talked about before. Ty, you're up, my man.
Yeah, we're going to rock quarterbacks. So this is definitely going to be like somewhat of a super flex conversation because I'll skip Trevor Lawrence. Kind of goes without saying that he is really going to be the 101 in almost every super flex rookie draft. But for a couple of reasons, I think getting to know the other quarterbacks behind him is super important. First off, 3 or 4 could go inside the top 10 picks, and top 10 draft picks start games, and they start games in year 1, and they usually blow up in their sophomore seasons, or at least mightily improve. And like I'm talking over 80% of quarterbacks drafted in the top 10 in the last decade have started 10 plus games in their rookie season. Sorry, 12 plus games in their rookie season. The exceptions are guys like Jake Locker, Jared Goff as the 101 under Jeff Fisher. Pat Mahomes got Alex Smith as a rookie, and then Tua last year. And actually thinking of Tua, the other reason we need to get a grip on these guys behind Trevor Lawrence is that quarterbacks making that decision can be really important in a dynasty rookie super flex draft. So thinking about Tua versus Herbert last year, and we saw in 2018 with Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen, Josh Allen, Lamar. Even saw it a bit in 2017 with the likes of Trubisky going ahead of Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, when a lot of us were still learning what Superflex was all about. So I think choosing between the quarterbacks can be ultra important, and you'll really feel that in your dynasty league. So I'm really happy to hit some of these guys. But the other thing I really wanted to bring up is that, we've seen some teams be hyper active here in the quarterback market in the last couple of weeks, and the Stafford trade really brought it to the forefront. You saw the hyperactivity from teams like Denver, Carolina, and the Goff-led Lions now, who all pick top 10 in the NFL draft. So, Dave, do you interpret some of that as a bit of a condemnation on this quarterback class, or do you actually think we're just going to see some more trade-ups in the NFL draft with all these teams vying for quarterback?
I just see I think that's a really great question. And I think we could talk on that for 20 minutes, honestly, because I guess what I take away from that question is I think we're seeing a changing of the guard at quarterback. The older quarterbacks, Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, Aaron Rodgers getting older. Tom Brady looks like he's going to play forever, but he's getting older and older. Ben Roethlisberger, there's some drama coming out of Pittsburgh today with that. So we're seeing a very major change of the guard. And then we saw some decent QB talent come into the league last year with Justin Herbert. I still like Tua. I know that's pretty unpopular at this point, but I still have a lot of faith in Tua. Didn't turn the ball over at like a lot, which just says I think that was what they're really asking him to do on that team. Mm-hmm. But so I think, what does that say as far as, are these QBs not very good? No, I don't necessarily believe that at all, because I think that's one. I know we're not really talking about Trevor Lawrence, but I think that's why Urban Meyer went to Jacksonville, is because it's Trevor Lawrence is what people are saying is a generational type talent. But I like a lot of, now I actually should say this. I think I've lost enough bets at this point and gotten QBs wrong enough to say that I suck at evaluating quarterbacks. Like, it's really tough to evaluate quarterbacks through data.
It is. And this is a really tough question.
So, however, I really like Justin Fields, and I want to like Trey Lance a lot. So Trey Lance right now is my QB3. Not a lot to go on there. And I know he played in an FCS school, but not throwing a pick is pretty impressive in a season, and throwing 28 touchdowns and it's rushing floor. And the thing is that I have to tell myself is rushing matters for these quarterbacks. You've got, even Trevor Lawrence has a little bit of a rushing floor. Justin Fields, that's going to be the most he can throw, but he's got some great rushing ability. Mac Jones, not quite as much, but Trey Lance, he's got it. And then even Zach Wilson has a semi-okay rushing floor. And we just see
underrated.
We just see every year how the Konami code, how impactful that is in fantasy football. So there we go.
Thank you, Rich Rebar. I think you nailed so many things there. Like Zach Wilson, I think, is a little bit underrated. Played shortstop. He has some athleticism. He's not a duck in the pocket by any means. I think he's super creative. Like, he has kind of that X factor to escape. You know what I mean? So I'm actually really excited to see what he looks like at the next level. I think Justin Fields was great. Would you be comfortable spending a top half of the first round pick in a Superflex rookie draft on Justin Fields, though?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. He's my 102, hands down. Like,
cool.
Some people that I respect to have him at 101. I wouldn't go that far, just because I think Lawrence has a lot safer floor. But the thing with Fields is that rushing, you cannot just, especially you can get a lot of immediate success. Maybe Justin Fields. Maybe Trevor needs a little bit longer to develop as a true passer. Who knows? Maybe not. He might not. But Justin Fields, day one, like Lamar, when he came in, had that rushing ability. That now he's not Lamar Jackson. I don't want to say that, but just that is so important. We saw it with Mitch Trubisky, his rushing floor, what that does, that made him a streamable quarterback at times. I like Justin Fields a lot, and I'm in a 16 team startup right now, Superflex IDP league, and I think he went like pick 18 overall. So he's and that's with a lot of sharp people too. So I like me some Justin Fields a lot.
And Trey Lance is the other one that stood out, because Trey Lance, Justin Fields feel like the two that could be game breakers, right? For your dynasty team. They're the ones who could actually make that big impact. And it seems like we're saying there's a changing of the guard, this bottleneck that's occurring at the position. It seems almost more important than ever to have that, high end. It's almost like missing out on an elite running back in regular leagues when you're in Superflex and don't have one of those game breakers. And he definitely, the size, he's just a huge human being. And, he has that deadly, he has the rocket arm. I think accuracy obviously will come into question. He's really just a tough one to wrap my head around right now, because obviously if a team goes out and goes out on a limb and takes this guy in the top 10 of the NFL draft, I am going to be all over Trey Lance. But definitely accuracy would be the worry there, and worrying if the NFL is just like a shock to his system, as you alluded to. But I really think, like, you go back to all these outside zone schemes that everyone's running and everything. I just think he fits so well in an offense like that. We just saw Taysom Hill have success as well, basically off the back of just play action and rushing. So I think Trey Lance could allow a team to have success with him as his quarterback, and I think he could blow up in fantasy if if he was to hit for sure. So Mac Jones, I didn't really, I either missed or didn't really get your thoughts on him. How do we try and place value on this guy before the NFL draft?
I struggle the most with Mac Jones. So I haven't really talked about my QB process much besides the rushing part, but I really, and this is true for NFL quarterbacks too. I care a ton about accuracy. Accuracy to me is what I think that's, if you can completing the ball is how you keep your job. That's a very vital, and it sounds stupid to say or Captain Obvious, but it is a huge part of maintaining your job. And especially in Superflex, you want your quarterback to hit that second contract. When you're investing a top 3 Superflex pick, you need that pick to hit, because if you don't, it's just going to elongate, whatever that term. See, this is the Mainer in me just making up words.
That's us keeping our guests an hour and a half.
So it's going to really extend your window. If you miss on a Superflex QB, now they retain their value because people say the QBs develop, but if you end up missing and you don't get out from him, that can really set your fantasy team back. So I need accuracy. I don't want guys who turn the ball over, and QBR matters a lot to me. Adjusted yards per attempt is a big deal. It's just a simple adjustment where it takes yards per attempt and it weights touchdowns and interceptions into the formula. So, and then also I have a hacked Josh Hermsmeyer stat of completion percentage over expected. I don't actually have it readily available here, but I really do rely on it a lot in my process, because it basically, it factors in how your strength of schedule in college defenses into the formula. So that matters a lot when it comes to quarterback play. But so getting to Mac Jones is same thing with Najee Harris, same thing with some like Jaylen Waddle, is like there's a lot of competition. A lot of quarterbacks are at Alabama. Mac Jones is super accurate though, but he doesn't have that rushing upside. So I worry what his overall draft capital is going to be. And I mean, it's awful easy when you've got 5-star recruits on your offensive line or 4-star recruits too, blocking for you. So this is when I would actually like to get to my Pro Football Focus data and look at his completion percentage in a clean pocket and look at these other players too, because that's a great way to adjust for line play. And I'm holding off on Mac Jones here, but he's got things I care about. I care about accuracy a hell of a lot. And if he gets first round capital with a decent opportunity at starting within the first year, yeah. Oh my gosh, the Saints, the Pittsburgh, I think it's mocked there. People talk about him in New England. I could see myself falling for Mac Jones. He's older. He doesn't. So another thing too, Jim Sonis at Number Fire, a big stat that he has is games played matters a lot for quarterbacks and especially at a younger age, because it shows when you start on the field sooner as a quarterback, it shows, it's sort of like with wide receiver breakout age. It matters. It just shows your overall talent, what the offense and the program believes in you. However, with COVID and how the whole it's tough to rely too much on games played in this class. And now that didn't affect Mac Jones, but you can explain away why, but he doesn't have necessarily the experience. Experience matters a lot for quarterback and decision making. Yeah. There's a lot that you can't measure with quarterbacks. Games played kind of actually does to a certain extent. And that's my one concern with Mac Jones is he didn't have a lot of experience. And when he did have it, he was a 21 and 22-year-old, and he's been that pro. It's just, there's some red flags there. But
I think,
yes.
So real quick on Mac Jones there. Sorry, Ty.
Sure.
I just wanted to finish off Dave's point there that Mac Jones clean when not under pressure, 80.5 completion percentage, 33 touchdowns, 3 picks.
Interesting. I'm curious how that stacks up against everyone else, but
and that is a huge, like ask Trav. I've already done a little nerdy spreadsheet myself of all PFF rookie quarterback data, because that is huge for me as well, as how a quarterback does under pressure. Is one of those major ones that I use. And you mentioned everything else that I use in my process, and that would have been, the only thing that I definitely add. And then you even went and mentioned it with Mac Jones. So I totally agree. And just to go like games played, it's not supernatural. Like quarterback has got to be the easiest position in all of sports that somebody would jump out at you in practice, if you know what I mean. Like, that guy can throw the ball to that guy, and this guy can't do it as well. Like, it just seems like you'd be able to notice a deep ball off play action in practice pretty easily. So I think games played, it makes sense that you want your quarterback to play. And we just see the horrible history that we have, even with guys who go in the first round, like a Dwayne Haskins or Mitch Trubisky, or these 1-year starters.
And two, like, games play, like, it incorporates, I think it's a measurement for things that we can't really identify looking at the numbers. It's like how much they work off the field, like especially accuracy too. Like, making a lot of accuracy doesn't come down to your arm talent. It's making the right decision. It's like following the reads. Yeah. And those two, when you those two stats, accuracy and games played, when you can look at those together, I think it talks a lot about I'm not just talking about arm talent. I'm talking about the stuff that isn't measured or is tough to measure for quarterback play. That matters between the years. That matters so much for quarterbacks.
So there's a big old Gators quarterback that we didn't hit, but I say we skip him. Trav, what say you?
Yeah, well, I mean, we might as well get into these tight ends here. We can talk a little Kyle Trask as we move through the process, but sticking in Florida, let's move us into the tight ends. Obviously, the main guy that everyone's talking about is Kyle Pitts. Everyone and their dog knows that he's a generational tight end, obviously. 6'6", 240, runs like a gazelle, big play, red zone machine. Essentially, he's just a big wide receiver with a tight end designation. I'm going to call him the anti-Chase Claypool, just because it's totally flip-flopped as far as their what position people are saying that they should be. But I'm curious, Dave, if he's being touted as this big wide receiver, like, should we have wide receiver production expectations out of Kyle Pitts, or would you say that is underestimating the tight end learning curve?
Yeah, I think people forget how hard it is. Is he going to play wide receiver? Is he just going to be a wide receiver, or is it that, like, it's tough to say is he just a slot guy? Or, like, it's really tough to say with Kyle Pitts, because I think tight end is probably one of the most difficult positions to play in the NFL, in my opinion, because you've got to block, and you've got to, you not only do you have to block for passing, but you got to do run blocking. You've got to take a physical punishment. There is a ton that goes into the tight end position, along with the injury rate and just the development. If you just look at the developmental curve for tight ends, they don't hit. It's like, even Hawkinson's was one of the best prospects that we've supposedly had in the last couple of years. And yeah, he had a good season last year, but he's not like the separator for you on your fantasy team. Yeah, he's getting you valuable points at a position that people aren't necessarily scoring a lot on, but he's not Travis Kelce. And people are already, I've seen a lot of people. I actually can't tell with Kyle Pitts if people are being serious or not, that they already have him as their tight end one in Dynasty. I think these people are being serious. Like, I legitimately see people.
Oh, totally. I've seen him for sure at tight end 3 in Dynasty for some people. Number 1 would be pretty wild.
And the thing is look, I've fallen head over heels for my joke on Tale of Two Rivals is David Njoku. I mean, he was
another Florida guy.
Guilty.
Oh my God. My wife just whispers Njoku into my ear, and that's all it takes. Like, just Njoku. And I'm like, let's go, baby. So I love tight ends, but the thing is I probably have to take a mid Superflex pick to make sure that I'm going to get it first round pick in Superflex to get him, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's probably, if I want to make sure I get him, I got to have at least the 106, 105, 106.
Yeah. And exactly.
And to do that, why not just see if he hits and then invest that kind of capital into him? That's my point of view, is like, all right, let someone else take that risk. And then once he shows me something year 1, then I'll give him the Godfather offer. I'll play. Yeah, sure. I love tight ends, but just let someone else take that risk. And then if he shows it to me, I'll put the money in, because honestly, and I understand with Kyle Pitts that visually, he does a ton visually. People will say that, like, he made is it Trask? Yeah, he made
Trask,
the QB Trask because he makes these insane, incredible acrobatic catches. I wouldn't know, but I've actually seen a couple highlights. But but honestly, I'm looking at his stats, and he really didn't explode until year 3. He was on the same level as Brevin Jordan until year 3. And he just exploded more than Brevin Jordan did. Mm-hmm. So and also it is tougher to also scout tight ends without their athleticism, without their draft capital.
Yeah.
I mean, he does have some nice numbers his last year, but is he I don't quite from a numbers perspective, I don't quite get the excitement. That's all. I'm not saying that people are wrong. I just need some more information.
And I think some of that leans towards the tape side just because of the athlete he is, the size, and the after the catch ability. I think I'm kind of in lockstep with you there as well, where I'll let somebody else take the risk because of that tight end learning curve. Another guy, you mentioned Hawkinson, Noah Fant was supposed to be a guy that you can just plunk into the slot. He's going to do really good work after the catch, and he's going to light it up. He's been decent for fantasy, but he hasn't been like what people are touting Kyle Pitts as, obviously. And I don't think Fant is on that level. But another big receiving guy that projects to be like an extension of a wide receiver, essentially, that just didn't pan out quite that early. I always kind of wait a little bit on tight ends, and I'm totally okay with taking replacement value as opposed to investing in those big dogs, aside from having a fair bit of Travis Kelce in dynasty startups. But
I have a question for you guys.
Yes.
In my head, just looking, I see a lot of Evan Engram type. Evan Engram type similarities. Like people are talking about, is he a wide receiver? Is he tight end? A lot of receptions in college. People loved Evan Engram coming out. People had the same conversations of him going early. Oh, he's going to be just a tight end playing wide receiver. And that's going to be a huge positional advantage. And then Evan Engram went out and actually had a pretty decent rookie season.
Yeah, great rookie season.
Yeah, and people were all loved him. And now look where Evan Engram is. And I know that's not a lot of it. Yeah, he has drops and everything. I'm not saying that Kyle Pitts is going to be Evan Engram. I'm just saying we saw someone have an insane rookie year. Not insane, but a very good rookie year. And this is where he's valued now. People are just putting him in throw-ins in some tight end premium leagues.
Yeah, Evan Ingram's rookie season is Kyle Pitts' 2021 ceiling because it was one of the three best rookie tight end seasons we've had in the last decade or 15 years or whatever it was, going back, like including Jeremy Shockey in that sample. That's all I remember. And Kyle Pitts, it's a hard sell because if we remember back, it was very opportunity driven because everyone was just injured for the Giants that season. And yeah, I couldn't agree with you more because Kyle Pitts is going to go top 12 in the NFL draft. He's going to go to a less appetizing situation or environment. And it's not even that comparable because Kyle Pitts played a lot more of his snaps in line than Evan Engram did. And I'm not sure, I could be wrong, but I don't think he's going to be as athletic as Evan Engram. I mean, Evan Engram blew us all away athletically. I think of him more like a Darren Waller, Kyle Pitts. Like Darren Waller.
I was thinking a little bit of Jimmy Graham.
Used in the intermediate. Yeah, totally. And I think like Darren Waller could be being used in the intermediate more. He just plays with Derek Carr and John Gruden.
For sure.
Athleticism matters a lot too for tight end. Like if we want to talk about like it matters for running backs, it actually kind of, there's some people that want to talk about it for quarterbacks too. And I'm like, okay, I get you that. But yeah, it has a lot more predictive power for tight ends than it does most other positions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So rounding out the tight ends, you mentioned Brevin Jordan. We've also got other names like Pat Freiermuth, Kenny Yeboah, and Hunter Long. That was my turn to potentially butcher a name. I don't know if I got that right for Freiermuth, but I'll take it. Dave, which one of these guys to you stands out as maybe the second best fantasy option for the tight end position that we might want to take in our drafts as a long-term option?
So for me, I'm actually going to go off the board and say Trey McKitty, just so I can name my fantasy team after him. But in all seriousness, no. I mean, I do like McKitty. He's interesting, but the best part about tight ends is you in Superflex tight end premium leagues, or especially in 2 tight end leagues, people are going to be gobbling up Kyle Pitts in the first round. I can realistically get Brevin Jordan in the 3rd round, possibly get Freiermuth in the 3rd round, get Trey McKitty. All these players are going to be available 3rd, 4th round, and maybe off the scrap heap too. This is actually a decent rookie. This is last year's rookie tight end class. We're kind of now. They're my last thing that I check off on. So this is actually the first time that I've looked at Kyle Pitts was an hour before our show, just because I was like, you know what, I got to get some Kyle Pitts. I got to understand, but like what everyone's talking about besides just what I've heard. But this is from what I've just seen looking really quick tonight. There's some decent, interesting tight ends where we could see probably some of the most tight ends drafted that we've seen in a long time. I think that's a very real possibility. For me, Brevin Jordan is interesting because I think it was Brevin Jordan and Kyle Pitts before the season started. I think everyone had them on the same level.
And
no, you can go.
Sorry, I was just going to hop in. Like he's the guy who's going to play in the slot almost exclusively at the next level. I mean, he played 261 of his 460 snaps this year out of the slot in college, 14 yards per reception in 2019, over 15 yards per reception this past season. So I think he's definitely the clear arbitrage play on Kyle Pitts.
And people like Freiermuth too, who he's got some interest, like 23 receptions in 4 games. That's that's pretty good. And actually Kenny Yeboah or whatever his name is, I actually hadn't looked at him until tonight. That's something that jumps on the page. There's just Hunter Long had some decent raw stats to go with. The thing with Yeboah that kind of jumps off the page to me is that he is a little touchdown dependent in his scoring. So, but overall, I'm going to be doing a lot of dart throws on tight ends, and I like on leagues that have deep rosters, 2 tight end leagues, which I actually play a lot of 2 tight end leagues, and I love taking risks on tight end. They're awesome. I really enjoy tight end having a developmental tight end because I think you have to in a lot of leagues just with how the tight end position is, and this is this is definitely the year to have some darts to throw on some tight ends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
And Freiermuth also played a ton out of the slot too. He played more out of the slot than he did in line in 2020. So I like him too. Just definitely not as like explosive, not as many big plays as But yeah, I think it's a super intriguing tight end class. But to go back to the whole point off the top, that tight end has that incubation period. It has that longest learning curve. The career arc for a tight end, in my opinion, doesn't start till year 3 from like a fantasy perspective. I'll buy a tight end who has 500 receiving yards or whatever. Like there's some thresholds that we can swear by for rookie tight ends, and if they hit those marks, we can buy. Obviously, I want to see that athleticism, how they're used as well. But yeah, I think having sobering expectations for all these guys in years 1 and 2, including Kyle Pitts, is probably the proper process.
Yeah, maybe this is the wave of players that finally gives us some depth at the tight end position, right, guys? Ugh.
Yeah, tight end's gonna be better next year.
Yeah, totally. It's gonna be much deeper. Lots of youth coming up. Yeah. Okay, so that's what we got, Dave. Appreciate you kicking it with us for so long. We almost got to the 2-hour mark, which I will say we are no strangers to, but I appreciate you sticking around. It's been an awesome show. I want to say thanks to everybody who was in the chat as well. There was people who stuck around with us for the whole 2 hours as well. So thanks to them for chatting. Dave, before we ride out, I want you to tell us everywhere we can find you, everywhere to get your content, and what you're working on throughout the rest of this offseason.
So you can find me at @FF_Spaceman on Twitter. I'm a writer for DLF, and I am also co-host of the Tale of Two Rivals podcast and a co-host for the Rookie Fever podcast. Tale of Two Rivals is a dynasty podcast where we have my co-hosts and we have different points of view and we try to reach a consensus. Rookie Fever is with Shane Swagger and Michael Finero, and we just spend all year talking about rookies. So we actually haven't even gotten to the 2021 class much because we're still talking 2020 because there's just so much to talk about rookies. And you can find a lot of my work on the Patreon, a lot of free data that you can't all in one place that you can't find. You're just gonna have to do a lot of work to bring it all into one place. So check that out. And some things I'm gonna be working on this year. We're gonna be doing our rookie profiles for Rookie Fever. I'm going to be doing a lot. I'm going to start really amping up my rookie talk, but also too I'm going to spend a lot on is trying to work with some like BMI. I'm doing a lot of research on BMI and why I don't think it's impressive or useful, trying to refine maybe breakout age, talk about different ways to measure breakout age. And also everyone likes to talk about dominator rating. I want to try to find a better way to calculate dominator rating. So those are just a couple of things that I'm thinking about, but yeah, guys, this was honestly, I was thrilled that you guys had me on here. I have you guys have so many great guests, and just to be on the show, talk to you guys. This is my first chance I've really talked to you guys face to face at all. And this was really an enjoyable experience. So I really appreciate you guys having me on, and I couldn't believe that the chat was freaking hopping. It was really cool. So thank you guys. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. I think we would echo that statement right back at you, Dave. This was great. We got a lot of information out. We definitely had you doing most of the heavy lifting on all the questions and stuff. So we appreciate that. And it was all good stuff. And Ty, you got any parting shots before I ride us out?
No, it's just starting to set in that we had the spaceman on. So yeah, I can't thank you enough. I can't tell you how much of your shit I have used. And I just like what you do, Dave, is save me from so much time and work. So I really am so appreciative for folks like yourself, like Peter Howard, who inspired you to be where you are. I love the whole chain of the fantasy community. And I think you're an incredibly invaluable member with incredibly invaluable resources to offer that community. So I can't thank you enough for coming on. Pleasure was 100% ours.
Thank you guys.
Always a place to stay.
You're too kind. To
stay in Canada.
So, I'm coming back for the chat now. Now that I know that like at Wednesday, 10 o'clock, I'm coming back for the chat next week. I'm looking
beautiful.
Forward to this.
And then we would love to have you back on the show as well, because rookie season is only going this way, my friend, and that is up. So we're really excited for that. And I will definitely be in the DMs. Like I said, thanks to everybody for continuing to rate, review, download, and subscribe. We really, really appreciate that. Go check us out if you're watching. Make sure you subscribe and follow us, and give us that courtesy download of the audio pod if you're not inclined to listen, which I think you'd be missing out. So and another last thank you to, of course, Viridian Global, where you can get all the fantastic True North merch. With that, fellas, I'm going to take us on out of here. Till next week, everybody. Peace.